have an answer for that. Yes, why might it be yes? No, why might it be no? According to Nietzsche, if he were around, I think Nietzsche would say, yeah, it is the last remnant. The fact that scientists are so obsessed with understanding and articulating human consciousness, obviously with the intent of sort of transplanting this idea of consciousness into robot life, into artificial intelligence, I think opens up an amazing potential discourse where you can talk about non-animate Christian sort of conformity, right? If robots end up getting consciousness, then we've infused Christianity into inanimate life, right? Which doesn't even really make sense, but it does. If you follow that, then, that's a little treat for you. So, Nietzsche to me is just like, wow, that's crazy, right? When we talk about the idea of transhumanity, of being, and I'm a big sort of transhumanist in a sense, right? A lot of stuff that I discuss has to do with sort of bridging the gap between the artificial and the natural, between the biological and the inanimate, sort of robot, AI, blah, blah, blah. I've done this both in sort of general discourse, but also in a lot of the logic that I've done, right, on my YouTube channel. So the question then becomes, if Nietzsche is right, and his discourse on consciousness really is a remnant of a borrowed methodological system from Christianity, then if we use that system and we buy into that system and say that that system is this thing called human consciousness, and then transplant that into AI, there's a huge, we should have that discussion, right? Can we talk about inanimate Christian robots, in a sense, right? This discourse 5 years ago, 10 years ago might have been hokey. This discourse needs to be happening now, right? Because we're on the cusp of a huge paradigm shift in a lot of things. So I encourage you, if you're still watching the video at this point, to have that discussion, right? It's an extremely heady discussion, but I think it's a good discussion to have nonetheless. All right, number 4, morality. This is a quote from Note 141. Morality as the denial of all natural processes, right? And we know this, right? Morality as the denial of all natural, N-A-T-U-R, right? Morality as the denial of all natural processes. And I talked about the anti-biological in Nietzsche, what it means to be anti-biological. I'm not going to get into that again, how he views the role of religious orthodoxy and the establishment and institution of religion as a means of suppressing the natural, of suppressing the biological, of suppressing desire, and ultimately exterminating it, right? For the true devotee, it's not even just a matter of suppression, because suppression, and this is very important, suppression assumes, right, that there is still an intent, right? Where those obligations may be laxed or removed, I would naturally fall into a particular sort of state of affairs. True ideological conformity happens independent to any obligation. I assume my obligation first, I internalize it, and insofar as I internalize it, all that governs my mind now is that obligation. And hence this idea of consciousness, right? So that morality becomes completely antithetical to the natural, to the biological. And I completely wholly swallow this. So much so that I look at myself and, I only understand myself in terms of my fall, if you will, from grace, my inherent predisposition towards evil, and so on. And then obviously the structure of ideological control has people, devotees, conformists, adopt a worldview that is completely pessimistic towards the biological. right? There's no love, if you will. And that becomes very problematic, as we've seen throughout the course of history, right? I think a lot of people would disagree with that, but I think at its root, a lot of, from a conflict resolution standpoint, I don't want to get too deep or too off topic, but from a conflict resolution standpoint, a lot of the conflict globally is in itself rooted in this anti-biological worldview. Because if I don't see the beauty in my physical embodiment, if I don't see and recognize a diversity in politics of identity, to use a technical phrase, then I just impose a will of destruction on all things biological. And then you have the destruction of ecosystems, you have the destruction of human beings in terms of genocide and totalitarian regimes, and on and on and on. It's all a manifestation. It's all a manifestation of this anti-biological morality. That remnant, that specific remnant, number 4, is still sort of permeating our international conflict to this day. And I would argue much past this day. Well, centuries after I'm dead and gone, it'll still be a problem. Unless we recognize the truth, right? Which is pretty complicated. Which is sort of what I'm trying to do now, is to try and lay out, at least aspects of the truth. What I think to be the truth. All right, number 5, truth as revealed truth. Truth as, or in terms of revealed. All right, truth as revealed truth. And obviously we should know what this means. Revealed truth as being truth, to be technical, you can go so far as saying a divine command theory, right? An action is right because God commanded the action. I've done a lecture on this before already in, I think, my ethics series, the first part of my ethics series. And basically, one of the problems that you have if you believe that an action is right because God commands it is that God can command contradictory actions and they both be right. I can say thou shalt not kill, but I'll give Abraham the go-ahead to kill his son Isaac. If you don't kill because it's the law, your action is right. If Abraham kills his son because God commands it, then it's right. So we don't have the cognitive ability to differentiate proper action, so we have to wait for the word of God in order to know what we ought to do in the world. And this is sort of where nobody really does this piece better than Bill Maher. Bill Maher will always jump on politicians who say, I decided to run for office because God told me, or I decided to, pass this legislation or introduce this legislation or this bill because God told me, and so on. And he'll be like, well, how do you know God told you? God could have told someone to do exactly the opposite thing. And in a sense, based on the text, he's right. He really is right. So there is some great difficulty in having a sense of revealed truth. How are we to know that the information that was revealed to you, person X, was revealed by God? Even if you have revealed truth, thou shalt not kill, my revealed truth might be completely different. You ought to kill. Who's right and who's wrong? The answer, to be technical, is we're both right. You shouldn't kill, but I can kill. And we're both right insofar as we both conform. But you can see how difficult it would be to create a political system that's based in revealed truth, right? So it becomes very, very difficult. Okay, so quick review of the 5 consequences of the holy lie, according to Nietzsche. Number 1, God is this figure who punishes or who rewards. Obviously, punishment and reward is going to be contingent on conforming to the commandments. Number 2, this idea that there is an afterlife. And we're going to go into a lot more detail, both epistemological, what we know of it, and ontological, what actually exists. So, he says there is no such thing as an afterlife. It's just this life and so on. Number 3, a conscience in human beings. For me, this is like super important. This is what I think is the most important, right? Because I think we still believe that there is this thing, and contemporary scientists are, I would argue, wasting their time trying to find out what this thing is, but so that there is